Vectors can be written in two different forms. One form is the component form, and the other one is the linear combination form. Both have the same ideas in them. So the first part of component form is the change in x's, and the first form in linear combination form is the change of x's. That's what your a is. So that's your x2 minus x1. And the x2 is always going to be the terminal point where the arrow is. So what you have to remember is that it's the terminal point minus the initial point. Therefore, x2 minus x1. And the second point would be part of the component form would be y2 minus y1 as written like this. So you'd have, for example, a 2 and a negative 3 when you're finished with this, whatever the example is. And the b part would be the change in y's. Again, terminal minus initial point. If you had an example such as the one below, the question is, what is the component form? Component form is going to be where you put down brackets, parenthesis, and you're looking at the terminal point minus the initial point, 5 minus negative 4, and 3 minus negative 3. So that's going to be A. Also, there is something called the magnitude of a vector. The magnitude of the vector is simply the length of the vector. And so it's written in a form like this, which is similar to absolute value. Now, absolute value is always going to give you a positive number. The length is always a positive number. So how do you find it? You can use the distance formula, or you could think about it in terms of the Pythagorean theorem. If this is your A and this is your B, you would see that it's going to be the Pythagorean theorem as well. This is y sub 1 here. You can do things with vectors. You can add vectors, you can subtract vectors, and you're just looking at adding the certain parts to them or subtracting the parts. And then scalar multiplication is just multiplying a number, a scalar, times a certain vector. So let's take a look at doing a couple examples. The first question is find the component form and the magnitude of these particular vector A, B. So first of all, the component form in this one would be A, B vector is equal to, and I'm going to look at the terminal, that's the second point, minus the initial. So it's going to be 40 and 52 minus 12, and 33 minus 41 is negative 8. That's the first question. And the second question is, what is the magnitude of vector AB? And that is going to be where you take the square root of the change of x's plus this, the change in y's squared. When you do that, you would get your particular vector. You can also add or subtract or multiply. So if I'm looking at, for example, what is this answer right here, 2g. So what I'm going to do is just multiply 2 times the g. So that's easy enough, 48 plus 42. And add it to h. And now you're just looking at adding the components. So the answer here is going to be 47, comma, 42 minus 3 would be 39. And you would do something similar to this. You would remember to do the parentheses first. So you do the sum, and then you would multiply by the 2, and then you do the subtraction. So order of operations still applies on these. You can do different things with vectors. You have to remember to find the certain forms. You have to take the terminal minus the initial, and the magnitude is using basically the distance formula. And and then we're just going to get into a couple more things you can do with vectors in the next lesson.